PM warns of risk of escalation after US bombs Iran nuclear sites by Jennifer McKiernan at the BBC. Yeah, weird that, innit? When you bomb the ever-loving shite out of people, they don't like it very much. Can't think why. Right, ladies and gents, there's tons of absolute bollocks getting spread around regarding this strike and what it entails for the rest of us. So let me explain things in clear, simple terms that are actually factually accurate, shall I? So Keir Starmer has warned of a risk of escalation to the Middle East and beyond the region as he calls for a return to the negotiating table after the US bombed Iranian nuclear sites overnight. Prime Minister said he wanted to reassure the British public that we're doing everything we can to stabilise the situation and find a diplomatic solution after the US bombed 3 sites. He added that the government had taken all necessary measures to protect UK interests in the region, but his focus was on de-escalation. I want to see the receipts. What measures have you taken? What have you done? Name me one tangible thing you've actually done to de-escalate the situation and protect UK interests. What, have you moved a couple of aircraft carriers out there? No, you haven't done that? Weird. Almost like we're a nation with a tin pot military after decades of underfunding and reaching out to DEI hires and honestly thinking that this type of thing was going to promote young men to join the military.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Look at the clip of that. And I was an adventurous young man that wanted to be a bootneck as a teenager. I was desperate to join an elite fighting force. I see that and I think I'd rather join the Salvation Army. In fact, nay, I see that and I think I'd rather camp outside the Salvation Army hostel and be forced to wank a couple of tramps off every night rather than join the British Army. And therein lies the problem, okay? I live near a big military base in the United States. I get nothing out of it. Doesn't benefit me in any way. The happiest nations on earth usually tend to be small countries where they don't have a big military presence at all, but they've got a happy, nurturing environment to raise the children. Places like Iceland and Denmark, well, before they got enriched by the raving psychopaths that run the world these days. So that's what the British people need to do. Yes, it was wonderful ruling the world and having lots of money and power. But what you need to accept now is that you're on a small, unfashionable island in the North Atlantic Ocean. You've got a demoralised DEI military and an incompetent, corrupt, self-loathing government. We aren't a power. We don't have any power. And the sooner you grasp that, the happier you'll be. 100%. Everyone's happy in the little tiny countries. Iceland's never worried about military adventures in the Middle East. And yes, at the time, I might have found it immensely gratifying to watch my mate Dozza fire 3 times into the engine block of a Toyota Corolla before it exploded 200 yards away from our convoy and scattered the occupants all across Route Irish in Baghdad. Yeah, it was immensely enjoyable at the time. But ultimately, I think I'd have probably been happier living in a nice little village outside Reykjavik, rattling a couple of hot blondes and then settling down with one and having a family in a small town where everybody knows each other. We get nothing out of this nonsense, we don't. And Keir Starmer's constant rattling is to desperately try and increase his support by a nation that is very nostalgic about the past. We need to move on. You need to move on. We aren't a major power. We should focus on ourselves. Deporting the hundreds of thousands, nay, millions of people that support the destruction of everything we hold dear. And battening down the hatches for the inevitable global backlash that always results from engaging in military strikes against pot-bellied savages that believe in the plagiarised scribblings of an illiterate goat. Because that's what's coming. There will be fallout, but it's not going to be total war. The Americans hit 3 nuclear sites in Iran, dropped big-ass bunker busters on them in the hope to completely unravel or at least massively slow down their nuclear program, because everybody knows they want to wipe the 4B2s off planet Earth. Everybody knows this. If you've got a long memory, you remember the Ayatollah saying such things. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was on record saying, we want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. So obviously, the Americans and the Israelis won't let them have a nuclear bomb. When your enemy tells you what they want to do, listen to them. My standing on this is completely logical, and it does take into account the conspiracy theories, which may or may not be true, about a certain group of chaps who want to introduce 1 billion regulars at Alan's Marvellous Snack Bar into Europe because they think it benefits them in some way. But I don't think when France, Germany and the UK inevitably become majority populations where everybody's a regular at Alan's Snack Bar, I don't think they think that that would be a good idea in the long run, because then, by default, France and the UK especially, who have active nuclear arsenals, will also want to wipe the 4B2s off the face of the earth, won't they? Because funny old things, the lads who like to kneel regularly in the big bell end-shaped churches are all in lockstep on every subject all of the time. Which is why it's hilarious that the useful idiots of the left, the Guardian readers and the BBC journalists, have formed an unholy alliance with them, and they think if they all get together under the umbrella of intersectionality, they can destroy the evil, straight, white, working class man. But what's actually going to happen is, if we fail and those boys take over Europe and form Eurabia, the first ones up against the wall will be the useful idiots that supported them. So to sum this story up with what's actually happened and what I think's going to happen and what you should be hoping for in the resolution, the Americans aren't going to war with Iran. The Americans bombed the 3 main nuclear sites and they're probably going to leave it at that. I think to Trump's credit, he's going for as light a touch as possible and he wants the Israelis to do all the heavy lifting. Hopefully, the Americans and certainly the British will almost completely stay out of affairs and let the 4B2s and the regulars at the snack bar mallet each other in the coming months. I think that's a logical and happy conclusion, and it's a happy medium, because to the people who overtly support the Ayatollah and all the adherents of the religion of pieces, I'll simply tell you this, right? Google the numbers. There's over 2 billion regulars at Alan's, and that number's growing every day, and there's 15 million or thereabouts 4B2s. So the enemy of your enemy is your friend. The best course of action for us is to let them pound each other, and then if it kicks off with whoever wins, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But how many 4B2s have knifed little girls in the face, beheaded soldiers, blew up trains and buses in London, attacked pop concerts, squashed kids like frogs in Christmas markets all across Europe, knocked down the Twin Towers, and generally been a massive pain in the arse for the last 3 decades? It wasn't the fellas with the little hats, was it? And yes, I'll agree with those of you that are sceptical. Yes, like all nations that are nationalistic, the Israelis have their own interests first. We know that. We know about the King David Hotel bombing. I'm very sceptical of their motivations. But logically, it's easier to beat 15 million than 2.5 billion. Sweating, deranged religious fundamentalists. Okay, so I think we should accept the limits of our power, stand as far back as we possibly can, and dig the garden. Dig the garden, take the dogs for a walk, and wait for it to kick off in England. And when it does kick off in England, then we win. We go balls deep in the most aggressive military policing we can possibly think of in the UK. We deport every single person that calls for holy war on British soil. We deport every single one of them. We deploy the military in the UK. We use the Royal Marines to put a ring of steel around the island. We smash the people traffickers. We can use the special forces. We can have SAS and SBS soldiers leaping out of helicopters in France, dragging the people traffickers off the beaches and handing them over to our American chums to stick in Gitmo, listening to the Barney soundtrack on endless repeat in a warm shake-on with electrodes on their genitals for all I care. But we need to get medieval on our enemies in the UK before we get involved anywhere else with our tiny former power military full of DEI hires. That's a plausible solution, it's a sensible path forward, and it's actually achievable. Okay, like me, revel in the glory days, love the fact you had a mighty empire back in the day, and enjoy watching the historical documentaries about it and Richard Sharp and everything else. But the glory days have gone, boys. They ain't coming back. We need to stay clear, look after our own, and when the war does come to British shores, and eventually it will because they all stick together, those boys, make sure we win it. Take the gloves off, mass deportations, and smash anybody that wants to harm us and ours. Oh yeah, and one more thing. The Finsbury Park Golden Bell End Church, back in the day, famously had more guns and ammunition in it than the average British Army base. Okay, so I suggest we get a few intelligence-led operations going on some of those while we're at it. Okay, that's just my opinion. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll see you all tomorrow. Toodle pip. Cheers.